Just make it fast. It hurts down there.
I'll make it quick.
Just make it fast. It hurts down there, Ingrid Thornburg sobbed as she sat trembling on the hay bale outside the Montana ranch house, her wedding dress still crisp and new, her towering 6'3" frame casting a shadow over the cowboy kneeling before her. Wesley Cade, the stranger who'd become her husband just 2 hours ago, looked up at his giant mail-order virgin bride with eyes that held no judgment, only a gentleness that made her chest ache. She'd traveled 3,000 miles to escape poverty and loneliness, answering his advertisement for a strong wife who could survive the brutal frontier winter. But now that the sun was setting and the wedding night loomed, terror clawed at her throat. "I'll make it quick," Wesley promised quietly, his calloused hand reaching toward hers, but stopping just short. Hovering in the space between them like an unasked question. But was quick what this trembling Norwegian immigrant really needed from the grieving widower who'd purchased her passage west? And could a man who'd buried his first wife and child 2 years ago in the frozen Montana ground offer anything more than a transactional coupling to a woman who'd spent her entire life being told she was too much, too tall, too strong, too wrong, to ever deserve gentleness? What would happen when the cabin door finally closed behind them, and the giant virgin bride faced the cowboy who promised speed, but whose eyes whispered something entirely different? The wind picked up across the grassland, carrying the smell of sage and coming snow. Ingrid pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the tears, but they came anyway, hot and shameful. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, sharp as a whip crack. "No man will ever want you, Ingrid. You're built like an ox. You should have been born a son." After her parents died of fever in New York, her brothers had made it clear there was no room for a freakishly tall sister who ate too much and scared away marriage prospects. The mail-order bride advertisement had felt like her last chance at survival. A practical arrangement. Nothing more. Wesley stayed kneeling in the dirt, his rough hands now resting on his own knees, giving her space. He was maybe 5'9", lean and weathered from ranch work, with brown hair that needed cutting and a face that looked older than his 28 years. Grief had carved lines around his eyes and mouth. "Ingrid," he said softly, "look at me." She couldn't. Her whole body felt wrong, too big, too awkward, too exposed. The dress the pastor's wife had loaned her was too small in the shoulders, pulling tight across her back. Even the wedding ring Wesley had slipped on her finger felt strange, like it belonged to someone else, someone smaller, someone normal. "I know what people say when they see me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I've heard it my whole life. Freak, giant, monster. The women in New York used to cross the street when they saw me coming, like my size was contagious." She finally looked at him, her blue eyes red and swollen. "I'm not stupid, Wesley. I know you didn't want this. You needed help on the ranch before winter, and I was the only one desperate enough to answer. But tonight," her breath hitched, "I've never, and I don't know how this works when I'm built like this." Wesley stood slowly, brushing dirt from his knees. The setting sun painted everything gold and orange, making the distant mountains look like they were on fire. "My wife, Sarah," he said quietly. She was 5'2", tiny thing, laughed like wind chimes. His jaw tightened. "She died screaming, Ingrid. 2 years ago this December. The baby got stuck, and there was nothing I could do. Nothing the doctor could do. I held her hand for 18 hours while she bled and begged me to make it stop." He swallowed hard. "I buried them both under that cottonwood tree by the creek, and I swore I'd never touch another woman as long as I lived." Ingrid's tears stopped. She stared at him, seeing the raw pain in his face for the first time. "But the ranch is dying," Wesley continued, his voice rough, I can't work it alone. Come spring, if I don't have help, I'll lose everything my father built. So I placed that advertisement, and I got 3 responses. 2 from women who wanted romance and pretty words, and 1 from you. He met her eyes directly. Your letter didn't lie to me. You said you were tall and strong. You said you had no family and nowhere to go. You said you could work hard and wouldn't complain. You didn't try to be something you weren't. That's because I couldn't lie even if I wanted to, Ingrid said bitterly. One look at me and any man would know the truth. The truth. Wesley stepped closer, close enough that she could smell leather and wood smoke on his clothes. The truth is you're scared. So am I. The truth is we're both alone. And the truth is, I'm not going to hurt you tonight, Ingrid. I'm not going to make it quick or fast or anything else unless you want me to. Because you're not livestock. You're my wife now. And that means something to me, even if we're strangers. Ingrid's throat closed up. In 24 years, no one had ever spoken to her with that kind of respect, that kind of gentleness. She didn't know what to do with it. Wesley held out his hand, palm up, waiting. Come inside. It's getting cold. We'll figure this out together. She looked at his hand, calloused and scarred from hard work, and then at the cabin behind him, small and weathered, but sturdy, smoke curling from the chimney. This was her home now. This stranger was her husband. And somehow, impossibly, he was offering her something she'd never had before. A choice. Ingrid wiped her face with the back of her hand and took a shaking breath. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her large hand in his smaller one. Wesley's fingers closed around hers, warm and solid, and he helped her stand. She towered over him by at least 6 inches, but he didn't flinch, didn't look away. He just held her hand and led her toward the cabin door, toward whatever came next, toward a wedding night that neither of them knew how to navigate, but would face together anyway. The cabin was smaller than Ingrid expected, just one room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed pushed against the far wall, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, and shelves holding tin plates and supplies. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows across the log walls. It smelled like pine smoke and coffee and loneliness. Wesley closed the door behind them, and suddenly the space felt even tinier. Ingrid stood in the center of the room, her head nearly brushing the low ceiling beams, her hands twisted together in front of her borrowed dress. She'd never felt more enormous in her life. Wesley moved to the fireplace and added another log, his movements careful and deliberate, like he was giving her time to breathe. You hungry? He asked without turning around. I've got beans and cornbread from yesterday. Not much, but it's something. Ingrid shook her head, then realized he couldn't see her. No, thank you. Her voice came out barely a whisper. Her eyes kept drifting to the bed, narrow, covered with a patchwork quilt that looked handmade. There was only one bed. Of course there was only one bed. That was the whole point of tonight, wasn't it? The consummation, the legal requirement that made this marriage real and binding. Without it, Wesley could send her back, and she had exactly $3 left to her name and nowhere to go. Wesley finally turned to face her, and for a long moment they just looked at each other, 2 strangers bound by a contract and mutual desperation. I meant what I said outside, he said quietly. I'm not going to force you into anything, but I also know you're practical, Ingrid. I read it in your letter. You know how this works, legally, I mean. The marriage isn't valid until we... He trailed off, his own discomfort showing. Until we consummate it. I know, Ingrid said, her face burning. She'd had this conversation with herself 100 times on the train west. She'd prepared herself for this moment, told herself it would be quick and painful and transactional, like pulling a tooth. Just get through it and move on. But standing here now, with Wesley looking at her with those gentle grief-haunted eyes, Everything felt different, more real, more terrifying. The thing is, Wesley continued, moving to the table and pulling out a chair, I haven't been with a woman since Sarah died. Haven't wanted to. Haven't been able to even think about it without feeling like I was betraying her memory. He sat down heavily, his shoulders slumping. But she's gone. Has been for 2 years. And I'm still here, and the ranch is dying, and winter's coming, and I needed help. That's the honest truth, Ingrid. I needed you for practical reasons. But that doesn't mean I'm going to treat you like you're just another piece of equipment. Ingrid felt something crack open in her chest. She'd expected impatience, expected him to want to get the unpleasant business over with quickly so they could move on to the work arrangement. She hadn't expected this raw honesty, this vulnerability. She pulled out the other chair and sat down across from him, the chair creaking under her weight. I'm scared, she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. No man has ever wanted to. I mean, look at me, Wesley. I'm a giant. I'm not soft or pretty or feminine. I'm just big and strong and wrong. Wrong how? Wesley asked, leaning forward. Wrong for a woman, Ingrid said, her voice breaking. My mother used to say I should have been born a boy, that God made a mistake. And maybe she was right, because no man ever looked at me twice back home. The boys I grew up with used to dare each other to ask me to dance, just as a joke. And when I got older, the men... She stopped, swallowing hard. The men either ignored me completely or looked at me like I was a curiosity, something to gawk at, not someone to love or want or... She couldn't finish. Wesley was quiet for a moment, his rough fingers drumming on the table. Then he said, My Sarah was tiny, delicate. She could barely lift a water bucket without struggling. And I loved her. God, I loved her. But you know what killed her? His voice went hard. Being delicate, being small. Her body couldn't handle childbirth. The baby was too big, and she was too little, and she tore apart from the inside while I sat there helpless. He looked at Ingrid with an intensity that made her breath catch. You want to know why I asked for a strong wife in that advertisement? Because I won't, watch another woman die because she's too fragile for this life. This place is brutal, Ingrid. Winter here can kill you. The work can break you. I need someone who can survive it. Someone who won't shatter. Ingrid stared at him, her mind reeling. She'd spent her entire life being told her strength was ugly, unfeminine, wrong. And here was this man telling her it was exactly what he needed, what he wanted. I'm still scared, she whispered, of tonight, of the pain. I've heard women talk about their wedding nights, and they all say the first time hurts. And I keep thinking, if I'm too big, too wrong, what if it's even worse for me? What if my body doesn't work right for this either? Wesley reached across the table and took her hand, her large, work-roughened hand, in both of his. Then we go slow, he said simply. We take our time. We figure it out together. And if it hurts too much, we stop. We can try again tomorrow, or the next day, or whenever you're ready. The law says we have to consummate the marriage, but it doesn't say when. Ingrid felt tears prick her eyes again. You'd wait, even though winter's coming, and we have so much work to do, and I'd wait, Wesley interrupted firmly. Because you're not just a worker, Ingrid. You're my wife. And I'm not the kind of man who hurts his wife just to check a box on a legal document. He squeezed her hand gently. But I also know you're practical. I know you're scared about being sent back. So here's what I'm offering. We can do this tonight if you want. But we do it my way. Gentle. Slow. And if at any point you want to stop, we stop. No questions. No consequences. You'll still have a home here. You'll still be my wife. That's a promise. Ingrid's heart hammered in her chest. She looked at this stranger, this grieving widower who'd bought her passage west, who needed her strength to survive, who was offering her kindness she didn't know how to accept, and she made a decision. "Okay," she said quietly. "Tonight. But," she swallowed hard, "can we just sit here for a few more minutes? I need to calm down first." Wesley smiled, a small, sad smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but was genuine nonetheless. "We can sit here as long as you need." They sat at the table for nearly an hour, the fire burning low, the cabin growing warmer. Wesley told her about the ranch, 300 acres of grassland, a creek that ran year-round, 40 head of cattle that needed tending, and endless fence lines that needed repair before the snow came. He told her about his father who'd homesteaded this land 20 years ago, about building the cabin with his own hands after his father died, about Sarah and their brief happy year together before everything fell apart. He talked until his voice grew hoarse, filling the silence with stories, and Ingrid realized he was doing it for her, giving her time, letting her settle. She told him about Norway, about growing up the tallest girl in her village, about watching her smaller, prettier sisters get married while she worked the fields like a man, about her parents dying of fever during their first New York winter, about her brothers dividing up the little money they had and telling her there wasn't enough for everyone, about the mail-order bride agency where she'd registered with shaking hands, lying about her age by 2 years because she thought being 24 sounded more desperate than 22, which it was. "I had $3 left when I got off the train," she admitted. $3 in the clothes on my back and a letter from a stranger saying he'd marry me. I didn't even know what you looked like. You could have been cruel or violent or—" She stopped, looking at his weathered face in the firelight. "But you're not. You're kind. I wasn't expecting kindness." "Kindness doesn't cost anything," Wesley said quietly, "and it's in short supply out here. We might as well give it to each other." Eventually, the silence stretched between them again, but this time it felt different. Softer, less terrifying. Wesley stood slowly and held out his hand. "Come here," he said gently. Ingrid's heart jumped into her throat, but she took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. He led her to the bed, and panic flared hot in her chest, but he just sat down on the edge of the mattress and patted the space beside him. She sat, the bed frame creaking under their combined weight, her hands gripping her knees so hard her knuckles turned white. Wesley reached up and carefully removed the pins from her hair, thick blonde hair that she'd braided and coiled for the wedding. His fingers were gentle, patient, and when the braid finally tumbled free down her back, he ran his hand through it once. "Beautiful," he murmured. Ingrid's breath caught. No one had ever called her beautiful before. "I'm not—" "You are," Wesley interrupted, his hand moving to cup her face, his calloused thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You're terrified and brave and strong, and you're beautiful." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, careful, nothing like the rough claiming Ingrid had imagined. Wesley kissed her like she was precious, like she might break, and something inside her chest loosened. She kissed him back clumsily, uncertain, and felt his mouth curve into a small smile against hers. "It's okay," he whispered. "We'll figure it out." He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands moving to the buttons of her borrowed dress. Ingrid tensed, but he paused immediately. "Do you want me to stop?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. She wanted this over with, wanted to stop being afraid, wanted to prove to herself that she could do this, that her body could work like other women's bodies, that she wasn't too wrong or too broken for even this basic human thing. Wesley helped her out of the dress, his movements slow and deliberate, and Ingrid sat there in her plain cotton shift, feeling exposed and enormous. But Wesley didn't look disgusted. He looked at her with something like wonder, his eyes tracing her broad shoulders, her strong arms, her height. "I've never seen anyone as magnificent as you," he said quietly. Ingrid wanted to argue, to tell him he was lying to make her feel better, but the words died in her throat because his eyes were honest. He meant it. He actually meant it. Wesley removed his own shirt, revealing a lean, muscled chest scarred from ranch work. He took her hand and placed it over his heart, and she could feel it hammering as fast as her own. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "I haven't done this in 2 years, and I don't want to hurt you. But I need you to talk to me, Ingrid. If something hurts, you tell me. If you want to stop, you tell me. Can you do that?" She nodded, tears blurring her vision. Yes. What happened next was nothing like what Ingrid expected. Wesley laid her back on the narrow bed, his body covering hers but not crushing her, his weight somehow comforting instead of threatening. He kissed her throat, her collarbone, whispering reassurances between each touch. "You're doing so well. You're perfect. I've got you." When his hand slipped beneath her shift and touched bare skin, Ingrid gasped, but he didn't rush. He explored slowly, carefully, watching her face for any sign of distress. "Tell me if this is okay," he murmured, his fingers gentle. "It's..." Ingrid's voice broke. "It's okay." He prepared her carefully, patiently, taking his time until she was trembling, not from fear, but from sensation she'd never felt before. And when he finally positioned himself between her legs, when she felt the pressure and the stretch and the burning pain that made her cry out, he stopped immediately. "Breathe," Wesley whispered against her temple, his own body shaking with the effort of holding still. "Just breathe, Ingrid. I've got you." "It hurts," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Just make it fast, please." "No," Wesley said firmly. "Not fast, gentle." He kissed her tears away, his hand stroking her hair. "We go slow, or we don't go at all. Your choice." Ingrid wanted to tell him to just finish it, to get it over with, but something in his voice stopped her. He was giving her control, giving her a choice. No man had ever done that before. "Slow," she whispered finally. "Slow." Wesley moved so carefully it almost hurt worse, the gradual pressure making her whimper, but he never rushed. He whispered to her the whole time, his voice steady and calm. "You're doing so well. Almost there. Just a little more. I've got you, Ingrid. I've got you." And when he was finally fully inside her, when the worst of the pain had settled into a deep ache, he held completely still, his forehead pressed against hers, letting her adjust. "Okay?" he asked hoarsely. Ingrid nodded, unable to speak. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it wasn't the brutal tearing she'd feared. It was painful, yes, but Wesley was being so careful, so gentle, treating her like she mattered. "I'm going to move now," Wesley said softly. "Tell me if I need to stop." He moved slowly, carefully, and Ingrid bit her lip against the discomfort. But something strange happened. Gradually, the pain began to ease. Her body started to adjust, to accommodate, and Wesley's gentle rhythm became almost bearable. He kissed her through it, his hands cradling her face, whispering her name like a prayer. When it was finally over, when Wesley collapsed beside her with a shuddering breath, Ingrid lay there staring at the ceiling, her body aching but intact. She'd survived it. More than survived. She'd been treated with gentleness she never thought she'd receive. Wesley pulled her into his arms, tucking her tall frame against his smaller one, and Ingrid pressed her face into his shoulder and wept. Not from pain this time, but from overwhelming relief. From the stunning realization that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't too wrong or too broken after all. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. Wesley's arms tightened around her. "Nothing to thank me for. You're my wife. That's what husbands do. They take care of their wives. Ingrid woke before dawn, disoriented and aching. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then Wesley's arm tightened around her waist, and everything came flooding back. The wedding, the fear, the gentleness. She was married now. This was her home. This stranger sleeping beside her was her husband. The soreness between her legs was proof that it had all really happened. She carefully slipped out of bed, trying not to wake him, and padded across the cold floor to the window. Outside, the Montana sky was turning from black to deep purple, stars still visible above the distant mountains. Frost covered the grass in silver. Winter was coming soon. She could feel it in the air, smell it in the wind. There was so much work to do. Fences to repair, cattle to move closer to the barn, firewood to split and stack. Supplies to gather before the snow locked them in for months. She pressed her hand against the cold window glass and looked at her reflection, tall, broad-shouldered, her blonde hair tangled from sleep. The same body she'd always had, the same face that had been called mannish and wrong her entire life. But something felt different now. Something inside her had shifted during the night. "You're up early," Wesley's voice came from the bed, rough with sleep. Ingrid turned to find him propped up on one elbow, watching her. His hair stuck up in every direction, and there were pillow creases on his face, and he looked young and vulnerable in a way he hadn't last night. "I'm used to early mornings," she said quietly. "On the farm in Norway, we started work before sunrise." Wesley sat up fully, the quilt pooling around his waist. "How are you feeling?" Ingrid's face heated. "Sore, but okay." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for last night, for being—" She struggled to find the words. "For being gentle." Wesley stood and crossed to her, not bothering to dress, completely unself-conscious in his nakedness. He took her hands in his, looking up at her face, because even barefoot she was taller than him. "Ingrid, I need you to understand something. What happened last night, that wasn't me doing you a favor. That was me treating you the way every woman deserves to be treated, with respect, with care." His grip tightened. "You keep thanking me for basic human decency, and it breaks my heart because it means nobody ever gave you that before." Ingrid's throat closed up. She wanted to argue, to tell him that wasn't true, but the words wouldn't come because he was right. Her entire life had been spent apologizing for existing, for taking up space, for being too much. And here was this man telling her she deserved gentleness, deserved respect, simply because she was human. "I don't know how to be a wife," she whispered, the confession torn from somewhere deep and frightened. "I don't know how to cook fancy meals, or keep a pretty house, or any of the things women are supposed to know. All I know is hard work, lifting heavy things, fixing broken fences. That's all I'm good for." Wesley cupped her face in his calloused hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Then that's what you'll do. You'll work beside me. You'll help me save this ranch. And in return, I'll teach you whatever you want to learn. Cooking, if you want, or reading, or anything else. But Ingrid, you need to understand, I didn't marry you to turn you into something you're not. I married you because of what you are. Strong, honest, brave enough to travel 3,000 miles to marry a stranger. That's the woman I need. That's the wife I want." Tears spilled down Ingrid's cheeks, hot and fast. Wesley pulled her against his chest, and she wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. This small, grieving cowboy who'd offered her something more precious than shelter, or food, or even safety. He'd offered her acceptance, a place to belong exactly as she was. They stood like that for a long time, the sun gradually rising outside the window, painting the frost-covered grassland in shades of gold and pink. Finally, Wesley pulled back and smiled at her. A real smile this time, one that reached his eyes. "Come on, let me show you the ranch. Show you what we're working with." They dressed quickly, Ingrid borrowing a pair of Wesley's work pants because her skirt wouldn't survive the rough terrain. The pants were too short on her long legs, ending above her ankles, but they fit well enough. Wesley handed her a worn leather jacket that had belonged to his father, and even though it was too small in the shoulders, it was warm. Outside, the morning air bit cold and sharp. Their breath made white clouds. Wesley led her across the frost-covered yard to the barn, where 2 horses nickered in greeting. He showed her the 40 head of cattle grazing in the near pasture, the creek that provided water year-round, the fence lines that desperately needed repair before winter. He pointed out the cottonwood tree where Sarah and the baby were buried, his voice going quiet but steady. "I'll introduce you proper sometime," he said. "She'd have liked you. She always admired strong women." Ingrid felt her heart crack open a little more. This man who'd lost everything was making room for her in his grief, in his life, in his future. They walked the property for 2 hours, Wesley explaining what needed to be done, and Ingrid asked questions, her practical mind already calculating work schedules and priorities. She could do this. She could help him. Together, they could survive. When they finally returned to the cabin, cold and hungry, Wesley fried eggs and bacon while Ingrid watched, trying to memorize his movements. They ate at the small table, and it felt different from last night. Less terrifying, more comfortable. Like maybe they could actually build something here. A partnership. A life. "I have a confession," Wesley said as he mopped up egg yolk with a piece of bread. "When I wrote that advertisement, I was desperate. I didn't expect to actually like whoever answered. I just needed help. But Ingrid..." He met her eyes across the table. "I like you. I like your honesty. I like that you don't pretend to be something you're not. I like that you're strong enough to survive out here with me." Ingrid felt warmth spread through her chest, different from desire but just as powerful. "I like you too," she admitted. "You're kind. You're patient. You're..." She struggled to explain. "You make me feel like maybe I'm not wrong after all. Like maybe I'm exactly what I'm supposed to be." Wesley reached across the table and took her hand. "You are exactly what you're supposed to be, and I'm grateful you answered my advertisement. Grateful you took a chance on a grieving widower and a dying ranch. Grateful you're here." They spent the rest of the day working together, repairing a section of fence, moving cattle closer to the barn, splitting firewood. Ingrid's body was sore from the night before, but the familiar rhythm of physical labor felt good. Natural. She could lift fence posts Wesley struggled with. She could swing an axe with power and precision. And every time she did something that showcased her strength, Wesley looked at her with approval, with appreciation, not disgust or fear, but genuine admiration. That night they ate a simple dinner of beans and cornbread. They sat by the fire and talked about their plans for the winter, for the spring, for the years ahead. And when bedtime came, Ingrid felt nervous again, but not terrified. When Wesley reached for her in the darkness, his touch was familiar now. Still careful, still gentle, but less tentative. And this time when they came together, there was less pain and more connection, more understanding. Afterward, lying in Wesley's arms with the fire burning low and the wind howling outside, Ingrid finally allowed herself to believe it. She had a home. She had a husband who treated her with respect. She had work that needed her strength. She had a future. "I'm glad I came here," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm glad you chose me." Wesley kissed her forehead, his arms tightening around her tall frame. "I'm glad you chose me too. We're going to be okay, Ingrid. We're going to survive this winter, and we're going to build something good here. Together." Outside, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, dusting the Montana grassland in white. Inside the small cabin, 2 broken, lonely people held each other close and slept peacefully. knowing that they were no longer alone, that they had found in each other something neither expected, not just survival, but the beginning of belonging, the beginning of home, the beginning of a love that would grow slowly and steadily, built on respect and gentleness, and the shared understanding that sometimes the strongest foundations come from two people brave enough to be vulnerable with each other. Ingrid Thornburg had crossed an ocean and a continent, expecting nothing but hard work and a roof over her head. Instead, she'd found a man who saw her strength as beautiful, her size as magnificent, her honesty as precious. And Wesley Cade, who'd sworn he'd never love again after burying his wife and child, discovered that the heart has room for more than one kind of love, that the giant mail-order bride who'd answered his desperate advertisement had brought not just her strength to his failing ranch, but hope, the kind of hope that survives brutal winters and builds futures, the kind of hope that transforms strangers into partners, contracts into commitments, and loneliness into belonging. As the snow fell harder, covering the grassland in silence, the cabin stood warm and solid against the coming winter. And inside, two people who'd been told they were too broken, too wrong, too much, slept peacefully in each other's arms, finally home.